New International Economic Order (NIEO). The newly sovereign countries realized that the existing international economy was based towards the rich countries. There was more dependence of South over the North. That is why they had been fighting for reconstruction of the international economic order to bring equality amongst all. In 1977, there was a negotiations between North and South at the Paris talks. In this conference, the developed countries agreed to provide an additional US $1 billion towards the aid fund for the development of poor nations. In December 1977, the Willy Brandt Commission was set up with a view to review the issues of international economic development. This particular commission mainly emphasized on the need for North-South cooperation. During the later period of the Second World War in 1944, a conference known as the Bretton Woods Conference was held with the aim of making some recommendation for improving international economic order. The First and Second World War totally devastated the world economic system. Therefore, to rejuvenate the world economic system become a primary concern for the states of the world, and the Bretton Woods Conference was primarily the outcome of this concern. In order to deal with the situation, the conference put forward some recommendations which ultimately paved the way for the formation of some international institutions, such as International Banks of Reconstruction and Development (IBRD), International Monetary Fund (IMF), and General Agreement on Tariff and Trade (GATT). IMF to maintain stability and prevent crises in the international monetary system. The IMF conducts surveillance of national, regional, and global economic and financial developments. It provides advice is its 189 members countries in encouraging them to adopt policies that foster economic stability, reduce them vulnerability to economic and financial crisis. It also provides for its member countries to discuss the regional, national, and global consequences of their policies. IVRD it basically provides loan to the middle income developing countries. Later on, the IBRD was merged with World Bank. GATT it basically regulates the international trade. In 1995, the GATT was renamed as WTO. But when the decolonized countries started to get independence following the decolonization process in 1960s, they found that the existing economic structure was based towards the rich countries. That is why they started agitation against the existing economic system and demanded for the establishment of NIEO. Therefore, the demand for NIEO gained momentum since the 1970s, and in response to this, at the 16th special session of the United Nations General Assembly (UNGA) in 1975, a declaration was made for the establishment of NIEO. The demand for NIEO by the newly independent countries was further supported by the named countries. The main purpose behind the NIEO is to remove the inequality from the existing international economic system and make it free from all waste factors. They have alleged that the IMF IBRD were dominated by the developed countries. The developing countries forced to import high technology from the developed countries, which make them dependent on the developed countries. Several measures were taken on the part of the newly independent countries for NIEO. G7 7 and G15 countries are the example of this. But since 1980s, the demand for NIEO faded away due to the lack of cooperation amongst the newly independent countries. The fastest growth rate of capitalism can be considered as one of the important reasons in this regard. Capitalism leads to prosperity to many of the developing countries. Role of international institutions. Multinational company MNC. What is MNC? An enterprise operating in several countries but managed from the country. A company or group which drives a quarter of its revenue from operates outside of its home country. Some examples of the MNCs are HP, an American company which manufactures laptops, desktops, tablets. Its headquarters California. Sony Corporation, Japanese MNC, deals with electronics, music, entertainment. It has been operating in India since 1994. Nestle, Switzerland-based MNC dealing with food and beverages. Nike, American-based MNC which deals with the production of footwear and other equipments. Adidas, German-based MNC dealing with sport items, footwear. Watch it. The role of MNC can be examined from the perspective of both home as well as the host countries. Impact of MNCs on host countries. Positive impact. MNC satisfy the FDI needs of the developing countries. In comparison to the domestic industry, the MNCs pay high taxes. It provides a handsome salary to its workers and fancy career opportunities, better social services to workers. Again, it is true MNC, the developed technology follows from the developed countries to developing countries, but along with the advantages, the MNC also brings some disadvantages to the host countries. The flow of technology makes to developing countries dependent on the developed countries. The domestic markets have to suffer a lot because they cannot compete with the MNCs, though they make a highest profit, but those profits are not invested in the host countries. Low cost of labor, low standard of human rights. Therefore, sometimes MNC are described as the agent of new colonialism. The impact of MNCs on the home countries. Due to their economic power influence, the MNC tries to manipulate the policies of the home countries in respect of the third world countries. They can avoid the increased cost of local labor by shifting production overseas. International NGOs. International Red Cross Society, the Amnesty International, the International Olympic Committee. The emergence of non-state actors has challenged the state-centric international system. It poses threat of sovereignty of states. Labor movement and capital movement. Labor migrate to other countries in search of better income, better work facilities. Capital movement. There are two types of international capital movements: foreign direct investment (FDI) and foreign portfolio investment (FPI). In case of FDI, the investor retain control over the invested capital. In other words, FDI is an investment in a business by an investor from another country for which foreign investor has control over the company he purchased. It is generally relating to MNC. On the other side, in FPI, the investor does not retain control over the invested. He only lends the capital, and in return he will get profit, but he has no control over the use of the capital. It is basically investing in financial assets such as stocks or bond in a foreign country. Factors behind the movement of capital. growing market for product. They invest in other countries, the capturing market and profit making. Highly populated countries, that is India, are mainly targeted accessing the raw materials of other countries. They invest capital for using raw materials of the host countries. Low wage of labor, they invest capital in those countries where the wage of labor is low. Risk diversification, they invest abroad for diversify the risks. International trade in consists of two elements: merchandise trade in service. The first one refers to the export and import of manufactured goods. The second one refers to trade in services, generally includes items like restaurants, hotels, transport, and communication. The characteristics of international trade: international cooperation, competition amongst the producers of different countries, separation of producers from buyers due to the increasing division of labor and specialization. The gap between the producers and buyers has increased. Selection of mutually acceptable currency, since the currencies are different, therefore a mutually acceptable currency has to be found. Normally this currency is dollar or pound. Free trade vs protectionism. Free trade stands for the interference. Protectionism means when home countries adopt some measures to protect their domestic industries. Adam Smith's theory of absolute advantage of trade: every country will gain by trading with other in this specialization area. Foreign aid, financial assistance. Particularly the developing countries are in the need of foreign aid when their domestic capital formation falls short of developmental programs requirements. The domestic projects need money which the domestic capital cannot fulfill. Types of foreign aid: bilateral aid, when a government of the country directly provides financial assistance to another country, it is known as bilateral foreign aid. Multilateral aid, when many governments provide funds to the international organizations like the World Bank, United Nations, and IMF, which are used to reduce poverty in developing countries. Trade aid. Trade aid generally refers to the recipient country has to spend foreign aid in the donor country or in a group of selected countries. Protect aid, when the foreign aid is provided for financing a project like school, hospital seats. Military aid, it provides for purchasing military weapons. It basically give to the poor countries in order to enable them to defend themselves. Voluntary aid, it generally provides for charity. One of the major disadvantages of foreign aid is that the donor country may interfere in the political and economic affairs of the recipient country. By providing foreign aid, the donor country sometimes aims to fulfill its personal political and economic agenda.